We're going to be starting in Numbers 22. I hope that's right. Wayne has made me question myself, second guess myself. I've tried to get better about coping with being wrong, but in this case, I hope I'm not wrong because I've skipped quite a few chapters in this instance if what I thought is not correct. Either way, we're going to have to start in 22 regardless. So Numbers 22 is where we're going to begin. We're going to try to finish the Pentateuch tonight. And originally I just had us finish in Numbers, but then Deuteronomy is really a repeat of a lot of the stuff we've already covered. In fact, it's a repeat of a lot of the stuff we didn't cover because it's the giving of the law. Deuteronomy means second law from the Greek name of that book. And it's called second law because it's the second giving of the law of Moses. And as we pointed out, we've been focusing on the narrative portions, so we haven't really looked at the law. So most of Deuteronomy will not apply in our journey except for the end. So we're going to be finishing the book of Numbers, and then we'll look at the end of Deuteronomy, and then we'll be ready to jump right into Joshua, where it pretty much from Joshua all the way up until 2nd Chronicles or 2nd Kings is really Ezra and Nehemiah and Esther as well, is all narrative. So we'll have a lot of stuff to cover there, but we'll get to skip Deuteronomy the same way we skipped Leviticus. Chapter 22 of the book of Numbers is a significant chapter. Really, the next three chapters are very important because a new character is introduced to the reader. He is quite a mysterious character. I have a strange, I don't want to say attraction, but this character really intrigues me. And more as the more I learn about him, the more I find him fascinating as a study case, I guess. And a lot of that is, I guess, because of the mystery of him, and we don't know a whole lot about him other than what we read from this. His name is Balaam. And he is infamous, really, for his donkey more than for himself. But Balaam's place in the narrative of the history of Israel is interesting. The people, as we pointed out, they're ready to go into the land. They have served their time, their punishment, but they weren't quite ready. And here they are. They've already conquered land east of the Jordan. And as you can see, that line there on the left side of that red section there is the Jordan River going from the Dead Sea up to the Sea of Galilee. That's not really Israel. Israel's on the other side. The land of Canaan was across the river, but they conquered some kings east of the river. Now they're here, and they were going to have to learn a lesson about heathenism. Or they would, whether they needed to. I mean, it's clear that they needed to, but whether it was a design of God or whatever, it was a lesson that they were about to learn. And as we've pointed out in the past, that heathenism today is a little bit different, quite a bit different than ancient heathenism. Back then, today people say, is God real? That would be heathenism today. Is God real? Back then it would be, is that God stronger than this God? Nobody was going to question if God was real, which makes them quite a bit smarter than many people today. But they would ask the question about which God's bigger and better than other gods. And they would choose whichever gods they wanted to follow. And they had all sorts of different reasons why they thought gods would be stronger in certain places, or different gods are stronger than other gods. Well, Israel was going to learn a lesson about, really the lesson of 2 Corinthians 6, verses 14 and following, was the lesson they were about to learn. Unfortunately for them, they were going to learn it the hard way. There are few lessons in life that are fun to learn the hard way. That's why it's called the hard way. Nobody wants to learn it the hard way. They were going to learn it the hard way. What that passage says in 2 Corinthians, Paul said, "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness? Or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? What portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God, as God said, I will make my dwelling among them and walk among them, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. Therefore go out from their midst and be separate from them, says the Lord, and touch no unclean thing. Then I will welcome you, and I will be a father to you, and you shall be sons and daughters to me, says the Lord Almighty." That was the lesson that they were needing to understand. Now, God had told them things like this already, warned them about the people that live in this land. They haven't even started conquering yet. But this would be a lesson, hopefully, the lesson they're about to learn would be very helpful, we would think, in them understanding the necessity of driving these people out of Canaan when they finally get to go in, because of the nature of heathenism and what it does to what it will do to their relationship with God. So here's how this plays out then. The people of Israel, as we saw on that map that's covered up now, if you have a paper, you could still look at that map, but they had conquered these kings east of the Jordan. Another king, Balak, he hears about this. Obviously, news is going to spread, especially when you got a people coming from the south somewhere that are taking over all these areas. That you're going to, if you're farther north of the people that's been taken over, you're going to hear about it and be a little worried. So Moab, Balak and Moab were terrified of Israel because of what they've heard. So Moab, it says, he said to the elders of Midian, "We need to do something because these people are coming in here and we're doomed if we don't do something." So what they decided they were going to do is they were going to hire this mysterious prophet person, man thing. I don't know what he was. But I know he was a professional. And we're going to see just how professional he was. His reputation had preceded him clearly. However, his name was brought into this. He's the one that was, there's this guy, Balaam. I know he can help us. See, he was notorious for being able to talk to the gods. He could get the gods to do what he wanted them to do. And that's a pretty handy skill to have. If you've got that skill, that would be pretty handy. Especially if you think about how we just characterized or described ancient paganism of gods. This god's stronger than that god, but if you can get this god to fight for you, hey, that's going to be great, because then we got our god, and then we can get this god too. Balaam was known apparently for being able to get gods to come over to his side to do his bidding. And the way they would normally think of that would be, we have to know what kind of offerings they want, how much, what's the price, what kind of offerings do they like, where do they like people to offer them. We just look into this, and then we'll know how to appease that god and get their favor for this particular mission. So Balaam is the one that is notorious for doing that. And it says, here was the message: "Come and curse this people for me, so since they're too mighty for me, perhaps I'll be able to defeat them and drive them out of the land. For I know that he whom you bless is blessed, and he whom you curse is cursed." And it says in verse 7 of chapter 22 that the elders of Moab and the elders of Midian departed with the fees for divination. That's what Balaam was. He was a diviner. He practiced divination. That's what I just described. And he was from Mesopotamia, fairly far away from where we are. Mesopotamia was really where we started in Genesis chapter 2. Mesopotamia is that region there, that big old red chunk, and probably even a little bit more of that. But they were going to, as you see that star, okay, I'm glad that star popped up. That star is where they are, the Israelites are. Mesopotamia is all the way pretty good distance. The map is zoomed out quite a bit here from the other map we just looked at. Same map, just zoomed out quite a bit. So this guy was coming from a distance. So he must have been pretty famous for his divination. Whoever you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed. Now, here's what the mission, what is it exactly that Balaam was trying to accomplish? Well, we understand that we usually tell the story that he was supposed to curse Israel. But every time he tried to curse them, he ended up blessing them. But what does that even mean? In this context, what does it mean he was going to curse them? Well, basically what Balaam was hired to do, what his job was to turn Jehovah, Yahweh, against Israel to fight for Moab. That's what he was trying to get done. They understood that this God they have is a very powerful God, and we don't stand a chance. But if we can get him to fight for us instead of them, then they won't stand a chance. It's sort of like, I'm sure every single team in the NBA would have loved to get Michael Jordan on their team. They probably would have done anything to get Michael Jordan on their team, because Michael Jordan is the Michael Jordan of basketball. That's how I usually compare great athletes. He's the Michael Jordan of that sport. Well, Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. Well, if we get Jehovah on our side, then we're going to win. But how are we going to do that? Well, that's where Balaam comes in. Balaam's going to know the magic trick. He'll be able to do it because that's his legacy. That's what he does. He was a soothsayer. He was a sorcerer. And some believe that he was at one time a true prophet of Jehovah, but he was apostatized. And there is the text seems to lend some support to that. Even though he's all the way out in Mesopotamia, there is some credibility to that idea. And it does help explain some confusing details, or some details that could be confusing about what's exactly going to happen here. Mm-hmm.
Well, in this it says, and God came to Balaam, and God said to Balaam, and God, it doesn't say the angel of the Lord, it doesn't say a messenger, it says God, which makes you wonder, did he come in voice? How did he know it was God?
Yeah.
I mean, I just find it interesting that God talks directly to me.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was referring to about if he was an apostatized prophet, that would help explain that. Or he may have just used Balaam's ego, to his own, for his own purposes, that if he has a reputation of being able to talk to the gods, Balaam's not going to think it's very strange whenever Jehovah talks to him, because that's what he supposedly does all the time, is conjure up the gods and get them to do whatever he wants. And of course, I'm speaking, in the way of the world, because there are no gods. So somebody who says, I can talk to the gods, they can do nothing, because there are no gods except one God. So.
But the witch at Endor knew that she didn't have the power, it just happened.
Yeah.
So either Balaam was just overly delusional.
Which is possible. Yeah.
Okay.
It is possible. It's not totally impossible. The witch at Endor, of quite a few years later, she supposedly summoned the dead. But when Samuel showed up, she screamed. Not very professional. Why did she scream? The text doesn't say, but it's pretty clear the reason she screamed is because the dead people didn't normally show up. She was a phony. Just like anybody who claims to talk to the dead is a phony. or summon the dead. But on this occasion, Samuel shows up and she screams, just like I would. After I woke up from passing out, I'd scream. But so Balaam he's the man here. He's going to conjure up these gods, and he's going to turn Jehovah against Israel. It's really a good plan. They got it all figured out. And give them credit for that much. They weren't delusional, it doesn't seem. They understood exactly what they were going to have to do. Regardless of what the source of their success has been so far, this plan with Balaam that's the only way they have a chance. So that's what it means by cursing Israel. He's going to turn Jehovah against them, against the people of Israel. And the conversation then is this that Joe mentioned. God came to Balaam. He said, "Who are these men with you?" Balaam said, "Oh, this is Balak, son of Zippor and king of Moab. He sent to me and told me, that this people's come out of Egypt, covers the face of the earth." A little bit hyperbole, really. They hadn't really covered much of anything yet, relatively speaking. He says, "Perhaps I'll be able to fight against them and drive them out if we can curse them." So God says, "You're not going with them." Which again sort of lends itself to the conclusion maybe they did have a past relationship, as prophet and God. But either way, "You shall not curse the people, for they're blessed." Balaam rose. He said, "Here's the thing. Y'all are going to have to just go ahead and go, because Jehovah told me I can't go with you." So they think he's playing hardball. I know what he's doing. We didn't offer him enough. We got to raise the price. This guy's good. So they offered him more. And Balaam said, "I don't care if Balak was offered me his house full of silver and gold. I would not be able to go beyond the command of Jehovah my God." There's another little interesting phrase. "To do less or more. I don't care if you offer me your whole house full of gold and silver. I can't go if Jehovah told me I can't go. I can't do less or more." So, but then he says, "You stay here tonight and I'll go talk to him again." God came to Balaam again, said, "Okay, you go on ahead, but you are not going to do anything but what I tell you to do." So here they go. Balaam rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and here they go. But then it gets a little confusing on the surface. So just to recap, God said, "You're not going." Balaam talked to him again. God said, "Okay, go, but you're not going to do anything but what I tell you." Then Balaam goes, and God's anger is kindled. His anger was kindled because he went. Now, he just told him to go. So why is he angry about him going? Well, it seems that it wasn't about his literal going, but the manner in some way of how he went. God being God, it seems that Balaam still was he was still going with the full intention of trying to pull this thing off. That's the only explanation that makes any sense, considering God told him to go and then he got mad when he went. And so the angel of Jehovah is now standing in the road. Balaam's riding on his donkey, and he had 2 servants with him. Now the interesting thing, and this is really why this story is so memorable, the donkey saw the angel of Jehovah. And by the way, he's standing there with a drawn sword in his hand. He's got a sword in his hand, drawn, and there's only one reason why anybody would ever have a sword drawn. It's kind of like having a gun drawn. If somebody has a gun and they've got it out in their hand and they're pointing it at you, the implication is that they're intending to use that gun. Well, if you have a sword you've got it out of its sheath and you're holding it. It's the same message being sent. The donkey sees him. Balaam does not see him. The donkey tries to turn aside. Road's being blocked. Balaam hits the donkey, tries to get it to straighten up or whatever. Happens again. Donkey sees angel of Jehovah. Presses Balaam's foot against the wall there. Trying to stop. I ain't going any further. Does it again. Angel of Jehovah stood in a narrow place where there was no way to turn right or left. Donkey sees him. She just sits down. Balaam's anger was kindled. He struck the donkey with his staff. And here's where the miracle happens. Then Jehovah opened the mouth of the donkey. And she said to Balaam, "What have I done to you that you've struck me these 3 times?" Now, Balaam didn't act too shocked whenever God spoke to him. I wonder if he had any reaction to the donkey talking to him. Because it's not mentioned. Not so much as him looking at the donkey in awe. Or thinking that he ate some bad food or something. I don't know. He just answers the donkey. Because you've made a fool out of him. Made me look like a dummy. Like I can't even control my own donkey. Said, if I had a sword, I'd kill you right now. The donkey said to Balaam, "Am I not your donkey, on which you've ridden all your life long to this day? And is it my habit to treat you this way?" Donkey's got a lot of sense. That's a legitimate argument. Most people, when somebody or something starts acting differently than they normally act, some alarms go off and they think, something's not right here. Maybe I ought to see what's going on. If your dog starts acting all weird, or weirder than normal, from our experience with our dog, you know something is not right. Maybe they're sick. Maybe a storm's coming. But Balaam didn't have any thought for any of that stuff. He just struck the donkey because he was selfish and thinking of himself. But he said no. Then Jehovah opens his eyes. Okay? Sees the angel of Jehovah standing there. And he says, "That donkey's smarter than you are. You're blind. You've blinded yourself." Balaam gets it sorted out. "I've sinned. I didn't know you were there. I didn't know you were standing there in the way." So he says, "Okay, go with the men just like you intended, but speak only the word that I tell you. You're not going to say anything but what I put into your mouth." That's how Balaam says it later. He says, "All that will come out of my mouth is what God puts in my mouth." So in verse 35, it sounds like a command. Like you don't say anything except what I tell you to say. But it seems to be a little stronger than that when it actually happens. And what it is that God was going to put words in his mouth. And he didn't really know what he was saying. He didn't understand the full significance of it, which wasn't unusual for prophets, really. I mean, there's no way that Isaiah and some of the other prophets, even though they were inspired of the Holy Spirit, there's no way they understood every single significant point of what they were prophesying. You think Isaiah knew exactly what Isaiah 53 would end up signifying with the Messiah suffering for the sins of the world? I don't believe so. But Balaam says, or God tells Balaam, "You're not going to say anything but what I put in your mouth." And yet, when we get to chapter 23, it's almost as if Balaam still thinks he's got a chance. And this is where we see just how good, this guy's good. He is good at his work. There's a reason why he's famous. He tells Balak, "Here's what we got to do. You build me 7 altars and prepare for me 7 bulls and 7 rams." Now, we recently studied Revelation. There's significance to numbers in the Bible. in Hebrew culture. I'm not sure if it's the same can be said of other cultures, the same numbers having the same meaning. Is there anything special about the number 7? I mean, we don't have to say what it is, but is the number 7 in any way significant in the Bible? It seems to be. The number 7 is very frequent in Revelation and in other places. Where did Balaam, I wonder, did he just get lucky? There's an unlimited number of numbers in the numerical system. He just happened to land on the perfect one that happened to have significance with Jehovah and Jehovah's word with the number 7. He got that number from somewhere. Seems he did some homework. And this isn't the first time we're going to see he did some homework. So he says, let's go up here and we'll offer these offerings. Maybe Jehovah will come to meet me, and I'll tell you whatever he shows me. So he goes up. Jehovah put a word in Balaam's mouth. That's verse 5. How can I curse whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce whom Jehovah has not denounced? So he ends up doing the opposite of what he intended to do. Now, his second oracle, that's his first oracle. By the way, we talked about oracles this morning in 1 Peter 4. Here's a good indication of what an oracle is. It's a declaration of God's word. So that was his first oracle. Here's his second oracle. Same thing, 7 altars. Jehovah met Balaam, put a word in his mouth. He ended up, again, doing the opposite of what Balak wanted him to do. Then he goes again, 7 altars, 7 bulls, 7 rams. His third oracle, same thing happens. Opposite of what he intended to do. Finally, and his final oracle is really the most powerful of all and shows just how far-reaching what he was saying really went, far beyond what he would have ever imagined, or anybody would have imagined for that matter. But in the end, it seems to have failed. No matter what they tried, the curse always ended up being a blessing for Israel. So his mission of turning Jehovah against Israel was a failure. But then, right when it seems that it was all over and hopeless, it's verse 25 of chapter 24 says, then Balaam arose and went back to his place. The place where he was, not Mesopotamia, but wherever he was staying there temporarily. Well, what ends up happening in chapter 25 indicates to us that something else took place after the failure. So here's what was the failure? The failure was we didn't successfully turn Jehovah against Israel. But what we might be able to do is turn Israel against Jehovah. And what did God say would happen if they turned away from him and went after other gods? Would everything be happy, cheerio, and proceed as normal? No, he said, if you forsake me, if you turn and serve other gods, I'm going to do to you as I'm doing to these nations. I'm going to destroy you. I'll devote you to destruction, just like you devoted Jericho to destruction, and so on and so forth. Balaam seems to have understood that, because that's exactly what ended up happening. We didn't turn Jehovah against Israel, but look, this God told his people that if they turn away from him and serve other gods, he'll fight against them. So even though he won't be fighting for us, it'll still accomplish the same thing. We win either way. So what we end up reading that happened is, while Israel lived at Shittim, the people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods, and the people ate and bowed down to their gods. So Israel yoked himself to Baal of Peor, and the anger of Jehovah was kindled against Israel. Well, it looks like maybe Balaam didn't fail too bad after all. Because look at this. This is exactly what they were trying to accomplish. You know what's ironic is what God told them in Exodus 34. regarding when they're going to go into the land. He said, "Take care lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land to which you go, lest it become a snare in your midst. You shall tear down their altars and break their pillars and cut down their Asherim, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land. And when they whore after their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and you are invited, you eat of his sacrifice, and you take of their daughters for your sons, and their daughters whore after their gods, and make your sons whore after their gods," so on and so forth. Look at that. When they whore after their gods and sacrifice to their gods, and you're invited. What is it that we just read happened? The people began to whore with the daughters of Moab. These invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. It's exactly what God said was going to happen if they weren't careful. And there it goes. It's exactly what ended up happening. So God says, okay, you kill all those who have yoked themselves to Baal. This will not stand. The only way to turn away God's wrath is to do this. So they did it. And it says, thus the plague was stopped, but not before 24,000 people died. When God says something, He means it. God didn't want it to be that way. He didn't want 24,000 of His people to die. But He warned them that if you do this, this is what's going to happen. And that's exactly what they ended up doing. And Aaron's grandson, Phinehas, sort of rises up as a hero in this to stop this plague. And he is commended for that because God told him to do what Phinehas did. He was jealous for his God. He was jealous with my jealousy, God said. So he commended him. So that was the lesson that Israel was going to learn about heathenism and paganism. We talked this morning about how much different it is to know about something versus experience it firsthand. Well, God had warned them, if you do this, this is going to happen, and it's not going to be good. Well, now they've learned it the hard way, too. So you would think this would be a lesson for them when they go into the land to remember what happened at Peor and not let it happen again. And that will remain to be seen if it actually worked. Well, in Numbers 26 then, they're going to number the new generation. Numbers chapter 1, they numbered the congregation of the people. Now they're going to number them again. And the similarity in the number is just staggering overall. Some of the tribes went down in number. Some of them went way down in number. Some of them went way up in number. But at the end, the difference is less than 0.5%. So it's pretty much exactly the same as it was before, of the fighting men at least. Notice the flip-flop of Simeon and Manasseh. Simeon went down 63%, which seems to be an indication that Simeon's tribe had more guilt than some of the other tribes. Whereas the tribe of Manasseh, the opposite. They grew in number by 63%, and Simeon lost 63% in number. But so that's the new generation. Back at square one now. They're ready to go in. And Moses is going to have one final task. He had formerly said, don't fight against Midian, but now that ship sailed. Now they're going to fight against Midian, and that was going to be Moses' final task, was to rise up against Midian. Moses had a history with Midian, by the way, at least in the land that's called Midian. And they plundered the villages, got quite a bit of stuff too. 675,000 sheep, that's a lot of sheep. 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, 32,000 virgins, Not real sure what that word could indicate. 16,750 shekels of gold. That's worth an estimated almost $14 million by today's count. I would call that a successful plundering. Got plenty of money now. That was Moses' final task. He served it well. And it's now going to be time for Moses to cross over the spiritual Jordan. But his main concern is, who's going to lead the people when I'm gone? He's not concerned about anything but that. He doesn't even try to put up, like, maybe God's cooled down now. Can we rethink this? Like, maybe I don't have to go up there and die after all. Cut me some slack. All I did was hit a rock. None of that. He's just worried about who's going to lead the people when he's gone. And that was going to be the man that we've met named Joshua. Where do we know Joshua from? He was one of the 2 spies that brought the good report, the faithful report, along with Caleb. And he's going to be the one to take Moses' place. Did you have something, Joe?
Well, a question. So Zipporah came from Midian. Moses was actually fighting against her people, and were his sons part of them?
It depends, I guess, on what exactly is meant by the Midianites. If that's as obvious as it seems, that the Midianites will be from the land of Midian, or if there may have been another group. But it seems, I mean, that's what it seems when you talk about these kings of Midian. The thing is, the territory that they've conquered so far is quite a bit north of Midian. They've gone past where Midian was, but that's not to say that they couldn't have conquered it. I mean, Moab was south too, so yeah, that Midian is where Moses came from. When he ran away in Egypt at 40 years old, he ran to Midian because he had killed that Egyptian, and he knew that people knew about it. At least 2 people knew about it. So he ran, took off all the way to Midian, and that's where he met the woman who would eventually be his wife. And his father-in-law Jethro was from Midian. And so that is probably part of the reason why God said, don't fight Midian. But now, because of their part in mischief, they broke the contract. And now God says, now you're going to get vengeance on Midian because of what they've done. It says, after this, Moses, you're going to be gathered to your people. So Moses' final days on the earth, we read about this at the end of Deuteronomy. Of course, God shows him the land. Joshua to succeed Moses, Moses' final days. So Moses continued to speak these words to Israel, and he said to them, I'm 120 years old today. I'm no longer able to go out and come in. Jehovah has said to me, you shall not go over this Jordan. Jehovah your God himself will go before you. He will destroy these nations before you so that you shall dispossess them. Joshua will go over at your head as Jehovah has spoken. 120 years old. His punishment wasn't as bad as we might think, as we have already pointed out looking at this. I mean, the poor guy, he's had to put up with a lot. He's already asked God to kill him at least a couple times. And so he's probably ready. But it is a little bittersweet that he's had to go through all this, and now he's not even going to get to experience the land. That joyous occasion when he's not even going to get to set one foot across that river. So that would be unfortunate for a little bit until he did die gently and peacefully when God just, made his spirit leave his body. Then he probably got over it real quick. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't think I'm going too far out on a limb to say, I'm pretty sure the company that Moses was with, once his spirit departed, was better company than the company that he was with before. Clearly. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, I think I'd rather be with those guys than, these crybabies, which is what they were, as we've seen time and time again.
And obviously Elijah, because that's who was at the mount.
Yeah, Elijah would, eventually. Moses was better off. It's not to say that it wasn't a punishment, because it was. But it wasn't like Moses was doomed to eternal hell just because of that one incident. God is just. So Moses says, what chapter was that? 31? Take this book of the law and put it by the side of the ark of the covenant of Jehovah your God, that it may be there for a witness against you. For I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. Behold, even today, while I'm yet alive with you, you've been rebellious against Jehovah. How much more after my death? For I know that after my death you will surely act corruptly and turn aside from the way that I commanded you. So, here, you take this book of the law I've written down here, you put it by the side of the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, and you keep it there. And it's going to be what? A witness against you. That implies that the purpose of God's revealed will is to keep man in line. It's a guidebook to help us from going astray, which we're naturally going to do if we don't have guidance from God. So it's going to be a witness against you because I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. So keep that book. It will help you. Keep it there. It'll help you not be so rebellious. Not in your hearts. Only you can help that when you let God's will and word, seep into your heart. But at least your actions, the book of the law will help you to not stray. Finally, then there at the end, Deuteronomy 34, the death of Moses. It's believed that Joshua may have written chapter 34. But at any rate, we read these words that, Moses it's kind of emotional to say goodbye to Moses. Whenever you've spent so much time with him in the narrative. And these words are moving when it says, there has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom Jehovah knew face to face. Not since. And that statement would remain true all the way up until Jesus of Nazareth. That there has not been a prophet arisen since like Moses until the one that was greater than even Moses would come. So Moses remained in the eyes of the Jews, he was pretty much, even Abraham couldn't claim the same things that Moses could. That's why Moses and Elijah were the ones that were with Jesus on the mountain. Elijah was considered to be the most powerful of the prophets. They viewed him as that. Moses was, the premier, the pioneer prophet who God knew face to face. So they were the two all-stars, if you will. But here his mission is done. He has successfully fulfilled his calling that he tried so hard to get out of. I can't talk too good. They won't listen to me. Please just send anybody else. He tried hard, but God saw him through, and now he's finally able to give it up and move on. And there he died on that mountain, and nobody knows where he was buried. Which, by the way, is another indication that to be gathered to your people is not a euphemism that refers to being buried with your dead relatives. Because Moses wasn't buried with his relatives. God buried him in this area that nobody even knows where it was. And yet, he was gathered to his people. Therefore, being gathered to his people refers to something other than being buried. We know that it means really the only other thing it can mean. His Spirit was gathered to His people, like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc. He was 120, and it says his eye was undimmed and his vigor unabated. That's what the ESV says. And it's believed, there's a theory, or at least a belief, based on the original Hebrew of that phrase, that that's a reference to his teeth. One of those, at least. His teeth. He still had his real teeth when he was 120 years old. Now, I got some relatives down in Kentucky, no offense, who didn't have their real teeth when they were 20 years old. But to have them when you're 120 and your eye undimmed, it took me 34 years to get these, and I think I needed them before then. I never knew it. But not Moses. God saw him. He was just as healthy as he ever was. He didn't die of natural causes because he was old. He died because God said, this is when you're going to die. And God just, that was it. And he was God's faithful servant. And we have to say goodbye to him, and we won't see him again until we get to Matthew 17. And we'll only see him for a second, even then. But the encouraging thing is, in real life, those who are God's faithful people will get to see Moses and meet Moses. Wouldn't it be great to meet Moses? To get to talk to Moses, just that's even surreal to even think about. To sit down with Moses and get to talk to him about the stuff that we just read about.